This is the In Focus podcast from The Hindu.
Hello and welcome to the Hindu's In Focus podcast with me, Amit Barua, your host for this episode. The people of Pakistan have spoken. They have reposed their faith in democracy and cast their vote against the establishment's efforts to decimate the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf of jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Independents, backed by his party, PTI as it's known, have won 93 seats in a House of 264, with the Muslim League Nawaz notching up 75. The Pakistan People's Party has won 54 seats. It looks like a coalition government will take power in the country. Talks have begun between the Nawaz League and the PPP to form a coalition government, even as the mandate appears to be for the PTI. So what lies ahead for Pakistan? What does the mandate of February the 8th mean? Will Imran Khan be out of jail like Nawaz Sharif for a fresh lease of life in politics? Or is that too early? To discuss these issues, I am joined from Islamabad by Shahzeb Jilani, co-host of Dawn TV's current affairs show Zara Hatke. He has also worked for the BBC previously. Welcome to the In Focus podcast, Shahzeb.
Thank you, Amit. Pleasure to be here.
Shahzeb, could you give us an overall assessment of what you think the results are about?
Well, this was unprecedented, what we saw in these elections. A number of independents winning the election despite all the odds against them. I can't remember an election in the last 3 decades where so many independent candidates have won. And not only one, they are the biggest group in the parliament. And this, again, despite the fact that Imran Khan is in jail, he has been convicted in a number of cases. His party had no room to launch a campaign. They did not even get their election symbol. They weren't allowed to hold their meetings. And they ran their campaign on social media largely. And frankly speaking, I was one of the skeptical ones in Pakistani media. I really did not think that all the activities on social media will translate into voting on the election day. So this is pretty sort of amazing that a party with no structure and no machinery, that people still went to the polls, even though it was widely believed.
And with no common symbol.
No common symbol, absolutely. I mean, I also felt that people will get confused. They wouldn't know which symbol to stamp on. But not only they knew, they went out in huge numbers. They did not make a scene out of it, meaning that a lot of times you didn't know that these are PTI people. But especially in urban areas, they made their way to the polling station and they gave their vote. And to me, that was a vote against the establishment for what it has done to the PTI and to Imran Khan. And it reflected seething anger among supporters of Imran Khan and the wider public.
So tell us, Shahzeb, from you're in Islamabad now. Tell us, there are widespread allegations of rigging. What do you make of these allegations? There are lots of videos floating around. There, lots of stuff on social media. What do you make of these allegations?
Well, Amit, this election was tainted long before it was held because of the reasons I just mentioned. But we had kind of expected rather naively that on the election day, the voting process will be transparent. And we hoped that what happened in 2018, when Imran Khan was the establishment's blue-eyed boy, and they ensured that he wins, we had thought that the establishment would have learned from it and they will not repeat the experiment. Instead, we saw on the election day, mobile services, internet were shut down across the country. As you know, it's probably true in India and in the region. A lot of times, if the polling hasn't started on time and there are concerns, they usually extend the polling time by a couple of hours to ensure that people who are coming or who haven't made it, they make it. This time, it stopped exactly at 5 p.m. across the country. So it seemed like the election commission wasn't really interested in ensuring that everybody gets to have their say, right? And then even after the polling ended, I mean, we were doing live transmission on Dawn TV, and I remember for next 24 hours, the results weren't really coming in. And that's bizarre because they had this
And in fact,
electronic.
the final results have just come today, in a sense. Some results were announced this afternoon, actually.
Absolutely. I mean, the results have been trickling in painfully slowly over the last 2 to 3 days. And that doesn't make sense. I mean, even before the digital age, I remember covering elections, and in most urban areas, you get like 80% result in from urban constituencies. So you can have a clear trend. And this time I remember we were doing the live broadcast, and everybody was just speculating because results were coming in. We were constantly demanding, where is the election commission, the election commissioner? They had one job to do. They were nowhere to be found. It's like everybody had gone home and they didn't care. And so that gave rise to the allegations and suspicion that results were being managed at some level. And then, as you say, there are a number of social media posts, videos where candidates are alleging that ballot boxes were being stuffed or ballot boxes were being brought in through the back door. And we know now that dozens of candidates have approached tribunals alleging rigging, miscount, and things like that. And these challenges complicate the picture because it really depends if these cases will be decided swiftly or will they linger on in courts.
One argument that I heard on some of the Pakistani TV channels was that if there was actual rigging, then why would the PTI win, or the PTI-backed independents win as many as 93 seats? What do you make of that argument?
That's an interesting argument. It's something that the caretaker government and the election commission has also suggested. The only problem is that the PTI, Imran Khan's party, is saying that despite all the efforts by state institutions to crush it, they've actually won twice as many seats. So what they are saying is that we've been deprived of a very clear majority, and actually our numbers are much higher than what currently shows. So we obviously were talking to reporters, people on the ground, and it is my assessment that in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, where Imran Khan's party is hugely popular and ran the provincial government for last 10 years, the voters were still passionately committed to Imran Khan. And the response and the voting was so overwhelming that even if you want to tamper with the result, there's only so much you can do, right? Same thing in Punjab, but to a slightly lesser extent, where the most popular party, Nawaz Sharif's party, arguably, did not get a simple majority. And many of their central leaders who have dominated Pakistan's political scene could not even win their own seats. So in Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, I feel that the angry voter came out in such numbers that even those who had like underestimated PTI were surprised. Uh, but the big question still is, Amit, that what we are calling them PTI backed independent candidates, and we have started to see in the last 24 hours some of these newly elected candidates already starting to switch sides. And that's what is the big concern, that if the mandate is with the PTI, it is still unclear whether it will be respected or whether their independence will start to break away. And that is what we have to watch over the next couple of days.
So Shahzeb, let's look at what government formation. So with the numbers that are there, it looks like the Muslim League Nawaz, the PPP, and the MQM would be able to form a government. Do you think that's the most likely scenario that's likely to emerge?
It is likely scenario not because the three parties you mentioned they want to work together. Uh, it is the likely scenario because the PTI party has categorically and repeatedly said that it will not work with any other party, including People's Party or PMLN. And because PTI has always been on this path of sort of a solo flight, and especially against these established parties. They have said it again today that we rather sit in opposition and be a strong opposition than back Zardari's party or Nawaz Sharif's party. And I think for that reason, the three traditional parties, People's Party, Nawaz League, and to a lesser extent MQM, may then be forced to come together. Now, they have a lot of misgivings about working with each other in the past. So another scenario could be that if, let's say, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari emerges as the strongest candidate, and he has also the backing and blessings of the army leadership, then others could support him with the vote of confidence, but not join the government. So a scenario we could be looking at is a minority government, right? Uh, and if that happens, it'll be a weak government, and it will not have the mandate to carry out wider reforms, and we will be again in a period of political instability.
And also, some reports suggest that Nawaz Sharif is unlikely to be prime minister. Say, if the Muslim League is to offer a candidate, would it be Shahbaz Sharif then? What's your sense?
Yes, I think it's pretty much clear that Nawaz Sharif's return to power for the fourth time is pretty much not happening because of the results we saw when he made his speech after the results. He visibly seemed dejected. He had hoped for a much better performance, but for better or for worse, he seemed to accept that the party is not as popular as he had thought, and the party has paid a heavy price because of the coalition government in the run-up to election, because of high inflation, and frankly because of the way Imran Khan and support for him has played out in Punjab. So Nawaz Sharif was basically appealing that all political forces need to work together. We need to end the politics of hatred. It was an appeal for almost like a national government, minus the PTI. But his opponents want to capitalize on Nawaz Sharif's declining popularity, and that is why talks are still on. I mean, even today, on Sunday as we speak, Zardari and his son Bilawal are in Lahore. There are reports that they may be meeting Nawaz Sharif to discuss a possible coalition. But I think it's pretty certain that Nawaz Sharif will not be the prime minister. If Nawaz Sharif's party leads, then it will be Shehbaz. Otherwise, Bilawal is aiming to be the next prime minister. So it's still murky, and discussions are still on. But those are the likely candidates and scenarios.
I also saw the statement by the Army Chief General Asim Munir, suggesting that all democratic forces come together. In a sense, he was also appealing for a kind of a national government.
Yes, and possibly suggesting that established parties, legacy parties, need to come together. He has a dim view of the PTI, and he has a dim view of Imran Khan. In fact, much of what is happening to Imran Khan is in part driven by the strong differences between the army chief and Imran Khan. So while the army needs a coalition government and a civilian government as the civilian face of Pakistan, I think he can potentially work with Shehbaz Sharif. The army can also work with Bilawal Bhutto, but I think past experience with Nawaz Sharif hasn't gone well. So the results also seem to suggest that we are looking at either Shehbaz or Bilawal.
Shadib, tell us, you're based in Karachi, you're now in Islamabad. I mean, what are people saying to you, on the street, or people you talk to about the elections? Are they happy with the results? Do they feel that the election has been stolen? What's the sense that you get from ordinary people?
I would say there is an overall sense that election results have been manipulated. They expected this as well. for me, the amazing thing is that they still came out. I mean, imagine taking an exam where you already know the teacher is going to fail you and still going to the exam, right? And to me, that is hugely amazing that people still went out and they expressed their anger in a peaceful way. Um, I would say generally people they believe that there's been rigging, but they're also really pleased that PTI has shown the performance that it has. Um, Virtually every single party is alleging some form of rigging where it hasn't done well, right? And the context I explained about the delay of results and mobile phones being shut, it adds to the whole drama and the whole controversy. So I think in the end, what's likely to happen is if major political parties come to a power sharing agreement, a coalition government, of course they will all have to accept the result. There will be some challenges still pending, but I think if most big players accept the result, then the process can then go forward.
Would you say that though the mandate does appear to be for the PTI, would you do you think that the aims of the establishment, in putting together a coalition or the established parties, that has worked in a sense?
Amit, it's a very difficult question to ask, to answer. What was the original plan? Because the impression created in the country and even abroad, I would say, in the international media was that the establishment supports Nawaz Sharif, and he is all said to be the fourth time prime minister. That's what everybody was saying, and every survey was showing because the PTI had been eliminated, right? And that didn't happen, right? So as you suggested earlier, the election commission and the authorities can say, well, look, you said the outcome is predetermined. It clearly wasn't. PTI has won so many seats as independents, so there's no substance to allegations of rigging, right? um, I mean, I think what might happen is that uh, PTI, if it's allowed, if its mandate is respected, then it can form a government in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. People's Party is all set to form a government in Sindh, and if Nawaz League or Nawaz Sharif's daughter Mariam gets to be the chief minister in Punjab, then most major political parties are getting a share of power, right? And for that reason, they may come together to form a government in the center, and PTI then sits in the opposition. Uh, that could happen because everybody's getting something out of it, right? Of course, they were claiming more, but they could settle for it. But I just feel that the sort of stability Pakistan needed as a result of these elections, that seems to be that's not the case. And I think we will still be in very turbulent waters because whoever forms the government is at the end of the day sharing power with the army. And experience shows us that, even if you want to work with the army keeps changing its mind and it has its moods and it has its own preferences and it sometimes like to punish civilian politicians. So it is not going to bring the sort of stability that we need.
But the
And
army would not be unhappy with a weak coalition government. I mean, it may suit their purpose in a sense.
yeah, I mean, many would say that's precisely what they want: a fractured polity, a polarized environment, and a weak government which can't bring about reforms to strengthen civilian institutions, but is there to kind of just agree to whatever army wants, whether it is in foreign policy or on economic policy. Uh, the problem is that is not the solution to Pakistan. Having this hybrid setup did not work during Imran Khan's time. It failed miserably. It set Pakistan back many years. And to now try it again with some rearrangement of furniture is not going to deliver. I mean, some people think that that's the only way Pakistan can function. I'm not so sure, because you're often at cross purposes. Politicians want to do something else. For example, they want to have good relations with neighbors, right? But the army, if it continuously overrules or does things to undermine them, then what can you do? Uh, so, I mean, my problem is that I believe that democratically run countries are better placed to perform in public interest and national interest, and that's why I don't have high hopes of a hybrid setup, which we seem to be again heading for.
So, if we look at the performance of religious parties, they don't seem to have done very well, especially the Tehreek-e-Insaf Pakistan. I think
Yeah.
JUIF has some seats, and I don't know about Jamaat-e-Islami. I haven't seen the breakup. But what's your sense? I mean, how have they performed in these elections?
I think fair to say that they've been roundly rejected. Now, the parties you mentioned, we can lump them together as religious parties, but some of them have a very extremist agenda full of hatred, like the Tehreek-e-Labbaik, and and some of the other extremists slash jihadist leaders, people who've been accused of sectarian violence and things like. I was pleased to see that they did not make it. Most of them did not make it. Now, JUI is a mainstream political party, and it performed quite poorly in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. It got some seats in Balochistan, but overall, not a thrilling performance, right? Same with Jamaat-e-Islami. Well, Jamaat-e-Islami hasn't really performed well nationally, anyways. It performs well in some provincial and local body elections. So, generally speaking, we can say that yes, the religious parties have not performed well, and that may not be a bad thing for Pakistan.
But they do command an influence, even though their electoral fortunes have often been very mixed. Would that be correct to say?
Yeah. I mean, they do command a lot of following, on local level, local elections. They often play a role of vigilantes. In the past, they were encouraged and they were used to further, the sort of the extremist view national interest. They were close to the Pakistani army and intelligence agencies. There are allegations that they were being patronized, and we even saw in the past that they won and they were running provincial governments as well. But even though the current army chief is supposed to be quite religious and hafiz the Quran, and every time he gives a speech, he cites a lot of verses from Quran. But it seems that he hasn't like actively encouraged them. He allows them. I mean, the army allows them to play out in the political field, but they're not actively being promoted or financed or inserted into the government. I mean, I think that's what the election results show. But these policies keep evolving, and this could change at some point in the future.
Shahid, before I let you go, it's clear that Imran Khan is a leader. He's a formidable leader. I know that, many of my, friends in Pakistan have mixed views about him. It's quite polarized, as you mentioned. But he's shown enormous perseverance, and even from jail, whatever he's been able to do. So the question I want to ask you is that, what will happen to him? I mean, do you think at some point the establishment and Imran Khan will come to some kind of an arrangement, as we've seen time and again with what's happened with Nawaz Sharif?
It is likely, and that's what our history suggests. That sometimes when leaders are out of favor, there's a tendency to write them off, but they bounce back with twice as much force. And I think that is a very likely scenario for Imran Khan. He's quite determined. Some would say stubborn. He's still holding the line. He had a year ago, 2 years ago. But the bigger surprise is that even I'm a critic of Imran Khan, and I said it's a personality-based party. Everything revolves around the Imran Khan and his thoughts and his speeches, and that's why I had a dim view of how his party will perform. But the results have shown that he has a huge, massive following, and his followers came out and they have voted despite him being in jail, not being active, not being able to award tickets himself, not being able to inspire his voters. So Imran Khan has to be taken very seriously and he cannot be written off. And it is quite likely that, as I said, if the new coalition government, stumbles and doesn't finish its tenure, and there are differences with the army may have to then engage Imran Khan in a conversation. The big question is whether he is flexible enough to engage with the army, or what sort of conditions he sets. Unless he also evolves while in prison and reflects on his own blunders, I don't know. He's not in a position to dictate anything, but if he wants a way out, he will have to show some flexibility and learn to negotiate with his worst opponents.
Kazib Jilani, thank you so much for talking to the Hindus in Focus podcast and putting in perspective, what's been happening in Pakistan. One thing is clear, that Pakistan's politics are never boring. So I do hope you give us a chance to keep in touch, and we value your comments on, the situation there. And we look forward to talking to you again in the In Focus podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
In Focus will be back soon with analysis of the biggest news issues. In the meantime, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other platforms. Just search for In Focus by The Hindu. We'll see you soon.